Hi, my name is Austin Chadwick, and welcome back to the Mom Mentality Show. Co-host, as always, Chris Lucian, and today we are very, very excited to have Abid Qureshi on the show, and we got some great topics lined up, contrasting between Agile, quote, software development was about, and what's it about today? How continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Favorite topic of mine, so I'm super happy to jump into that one. And asking the question, why does higher education institutions still teach Waterfall? So a lot of rich content here today. But before we jump in, Avid, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, yeah. So thank you, Austin. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. My name is Abid Qureshi, and I live in London in the UK. I am Canadian, which is why I don't have an accent. You can see I just talk normally here. No, I've been here for 20 years now, and I coach people in software development, agile software development, mostly XP. I also teach non-technical people about Scrum and extreme programming and lead a number of workshops. So I'm an certified enterprise coach with the Scrum Alliance and also certified Scrum trainer with the Scrum Alliance.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Thanks for that intro. Yeah, what are your thoughts here when you think about software development, Agile, what it was about then and what it's about today?
Hmm.
What observations do you have here?
Well, I just look at it, what it says on the tin, and the original ideas were around promoting lightweight methods. I think what's happened today is we're promoting, there seems to be a lot of buzz around promoting heavyweight processes.
Mm.
So it's a bit disappointing because I've also been a victim of heavyweight processes where just nothing gets done and you just want to get stuff done. And my early experience was with Prince 2, which is big. It's a UK version of PMP. So you've
Mm.
seen PMP and PMI and PMBOK, right? These are huge bodies of knowledge with lots of processes and stuff. Um, and when I moved to the UK, every time I joined a startup, really small company. We're like seven or eight people. I think it was the sixth or seventh developer there, and we were getting stuff done. And we hired who hired me actually was a Prince 2 project manager, and a lot of things we did were very, very formal, which is I think is warranted, but it was also slowing a lot of stuff down and lots of process. And we're just a small group of people. And
Mm.
every time I asked, why are we doing things this way? And we was told we follow Prince 2, and Prince 2 is supposed to be best practice. So, a lot of companies get into this trap. We're going to be a big company. We're going to have to hire professional managers and put some process in place. And I think that's good. I think process is good, but I think the people who are doing the work should come up with the processes, not the off-the-shelf processes. And that's why I say, I take it, what it says on the tin. Agile software development is about uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it, not by dogmatically following the practices, prescribed by others. And I think that's what's happened is a lot of people are so reluctant to take responsibility for their own practices that we look to best practices. And I think if the authors of the manifesto would have would have felt that there were best practices, then they probably would have said that. We have uncovered the best way of developing software. But they didn't. They said we are uncovering the best way of developing software, which means it's an ongoing thing. And it's almost like explicitly they're saying, don't follow our ideas. Don't follow Scrum. Don't follow extreme programming. Your job is to uncover better ways to adapt. And I think that's something we've completely forgotten is that and it seems like if this practice is good and this practice is good and this practice is good and this practice is good, let's put them into one big, massive pile of processes, and we'll become all the more better because we're doing all the best of the best. And we've completely forgotten about the idea of uncovering better ways. So promoting, I think, lightweight methods and discouraging off-the-shelf bloated processes. But now we see off-the-shelf bloated processes have now kind of annexed the whole agile thing, and it's
Yeah.
become so nebulous that I
Mm.
don't even know what it means anymore. So
Well,
um,
and I think that
yeah.
a lot of these big practices, I think you're right. I think agile and agility have sort of lost their meaning, and because that identity is gone, there's uh, a lot of reverting to even waterfall sort of things. I see a lot of the like more recent tech layoffs, at least since like 2023 and on. A large portion of that have been like agile specific roles, right? So, and then I think the organizational memory around the things that were learned while those agile roles were there, sort of, slowly disappears or quickly, depending on how you look at it. So, and I think I also agree. I think I'm a big fan of experimentation and like I like to tell the group, exploring the unexplored potential. And it's coming up with new things and saying like, is this good or is this bad, and what have we learned, and then iterating. How do you see um, agile or agility regaining its identity, or is there an answer to this, or is this like a problem that we as a community need to deal with?
Well, I think it's something we have to deal with, and I think the key is to not use the word agile at all, because I think it's not about agile. The manifesto itself is not about agile. I think that's what
Mhm.
people completely miss, because they look at the URL and it's called they see it says the Agile Manifesto. But if you look at the title of the document, it's not called the Agile Manifesto. So I personally refuse to call it the Agile Manifesto, and I tell people it's not a document about agile. You could have used another adjective, and they did. They used adjectives like lightweight methods. They use adaptive was a favorite for a day before they realized they couldn't use that because somebody else would have used it in that meeting. So adaptive, agile, adaptive, but it's not actually about agile. It's about software development. We are uncovering better ways of developing software. And when you say this is a big elephant, the subject is the elephant, it's the noun, whereas big is simply the adjective. And people have made the adjective and turned it into a noun. They think the document is about agile, but they're missing the point. It's actually about software development. All those people were uncovering better ways of developing software by actually doing it. They weren't frauds. They were actually people who are doing it. And if they didn't have a software development background, they took an active interest in trying to explore what possibility does object-oriented programming have, and how does it increase agility. And I think that's the other thing we've completely forgotten. The original movement was about what it was born out of the object-oriented programming movement, OOPS law, and these conferences. And we've completely forgotten about that. That this is a technology that allowed us to, for example, have business people and developers work together daily. It's the technology that allowed us to pay continuous attention to technical excellence. All those principles, you
Mhm.
can see a direct correlation to object-oriented programming and the things that particular technology enabled us to do. So we've forgotten about the software development bit. And you even ask people who are coaching and teaching this stuff, and you ask them what is the opening statement of the manifesto for Agile Software Development, and they'll say individuals and interactions and over processes and tools. And I said, what's the part above that? We are uncovering better ways of developing software. And so it's like we've almost edited out any mention of software,
Mhm.
and it's
Mm.
become, a project management fad, really.
Mm.
And so I think we've stopped using the word agile and just focus on software development, maybe recapture adaptive software development, promoting lightweight methods, LWPs, lightweight processes, LWMs, lightweight methods, so people can, rediscover what the essence of the movement was.
Mm. Nice. Yeah. I almost feel like it's like the yes and technique. I almost felt like at a meta level, that's what Waterfall did to Agile. It was like, yes, Agile. And then it like added everything back in that was what that was
Mm-hmm.
apparently taken out.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember recently I watched a continuous delivery channel video with Kent Beck, and he was talking about how Waterfall is alive and well and thriving, and they maybe just don't use that word. It's just like what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And going back to your kind of original story where you got set straight, right? Like, hey, what are you doing? Uncovering your own process here. This is the process we followed. I guess in a real practical sense, how do you handle being princed like that or PMP'd? Like, what are your first moves?
Well, the first thing was to understand it. So what I did was I went and studied it, and
Mm.
I studied Prince 2. I did the foundation exam. I did the practitioner exam, and that actually made things worse because now there's two princes. And when you have two princes, there's problems. I didn't want anyone's job. I just want to understand why we were doing what we were doing the way we did it, because I couldn't criticize something unless I understood
Yeah.
it. And so I still have the book on my shelf here. I've never cracked it open since, and I think most PMP practitioners have never cracked it open since their exam, because they know that these are, again, bloated, off-the-shelf processes, which are, um, if by the time you try to implement all of these things, you wouldn't have any money to do any software development. So I think most people kind of recognize this, and they renew their PMPs and their Prince 2s every couple of years, knowing well that we don't use this stuff. We just don't. And when every time, even after that, when I was working in consultancies, and they would try to come up with their own best practices, where they take templates from other people, collate them, put the processes in place. The first thing we do, because the government's people, they want to be able to track and monitor stuff, so then you have to have checkpoints and things like that, and to justify spending and things like that, which is fair. But the first thing we do when we look at those templates and those processes is we start to chuck out stuff. We said, I can't use this. This doesn't really apply to my situation. Ooh, this doesn't work here because we don't have this. Oh, this doesn't work here. So in the end, you end up distilling most of it, and you're getting to, I think what people have to start to realize is that every situation is unique, and there really are no best practices. And they might look appealing because they're published in a book, and a nice glossy book, and there are courses on it. But in the end of the day, things change so fast, so quickly,
Mm.
that by the time you finish recording something in a template and publishing it, it's already, it's already, chances are it's already obsolete, and that's only going to increase, right? So I tried to understand it. Of course, I challenged it as well. But I always tell people, what's more important, being correct or being employed? And I always tell people it's being employed. Remember that. So, um, so yeah. But
Yeah,
unfortunately,
maybe.
what I've seen now is now that the agile is the establishment, and the
Mm.
ones who are um, um, challenging the agile establishment, they're also now in trouble. So
Yeah. And this might transition us to the next topic, but I think it's still related to the first. So your second topic was continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility, and the how on that. And I guess one maybe to get us started on this topic is the uncovering, how radical is the uncovering better ways? And so is there anything that has stood the test of time for you? Maybe with technical excellence and good design, such that you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater when you're uncovering new ways, or is there anything or has it all kind of been, variable, like every situation, for example, refactoring may or may not apply or something like that, or something like refactoring held true through all contexts you've been in.
I mean, I think the practices are the ones that are uh, more easily thrown out.
Okay.
They're the ones that need. The principles are the ones that are more timeless. So I
Okay.
always go back to, I don't go to the practices as much as I do to the principles. The only time I go to the practices is if I want to teach people the principles, because the principles that can be read off of a document, or you can do some practices and then you start to see the principles come to life.
Mm.
But once those principles become yours, the onus is on you to take responsibility for evolving your own practices. But even the principles can be challenged, right?
Mm.
Um, for example, face-to-face communication. Okay. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a developed team is through face-to-face communication. I would challenge that. I would challenge that. For example, when I'm mob programming with people in my workshops, it actually works better remotely over Zoom. It actually works better. Um, there's much more. It's more focused. It's more intense. It's more provided you have the technology. People
Mm.
have got a good noise canceling headset. They got the sound, and it works really, really well. I think better than if you were in a room with someone programming.
Mm.
So I think the manifesto was written 2001, February 2001. So that was before we had Zoom. I mean, look at you and I. We're in completely 10-hour different time zones apart, and yet we can have a conversation as if we're in the same room. And we got to reflect on that. It's because of technology. I think it enables this kind of agility where we can actually program with people from across the world and tap into people's experiences and not have to get onto a plane and fly around. And when I teach my classes, people forget after 2 days of a workshop. They forget that they're actually in different time zones. It feels like we're in the same room. And some people, English is maybe not their first language. Some people are more expressive in writing. We all experience that. When I tell my wife something and she says, "Just text me," and I said, "No, you're right here. I'll just tell you." She said, "No, just text me." Why does she want me to text her? Because at that moment, it's actually more efficient and more effective for me to send her a message rather than tell her something that she might forget. So having the means to use other forms of communication. We have access to Google Translate and all these technologies which allow us to communicate in other ways. We have Mural, we have Miro, we have Trello, and all these plethora of tools that we can use, which just so much more effective than writing these sticky notes on the wall and everybody's trying to see them from far and then they fall off the wall. And so the other thing I think was also really eye-opening to me was the ideas. Technical excellence is important, but we should never dismiss people who do not have a technical background because they come up with some of the craziest ideas that work, which really challenge people like me who are like, no, that's not how you're supposed to do things. I'll give you an example. I used to work at a publishing house, Pearson Group. They also do exam boards and they do publish of textbooks and things like that. But there was a guy there, Nassim Ershad, I remember now, and I was supposed to be the agile authority on the job and the coach and also the technical authority, and he was a traditional project manager, ultra nervous on our case. How many hours are left? What are you going to do in the next? What's going to happen? For good reason. He understood the context that we were in, that we were developing stuff, but we don't work in a vacuum. There are stakeholders who have expectations, and there was a lot of discord and acrimony for the first 3 months of the project. We had a 1-year project, and 3 months into it, people were getting in trouble. Some people were dismissed. There was a lot of problems, political issues. And he said, "Can we go live now?" I said, "No, we can't go live now. We still have another 9 months worth of development before we go live. It looks barely like anything. We can't show this stuff. It's embarrassing." And they said, "But the stakeholders are going to pull the plug because they haven't seen anything yet." I said, "It's okay. It's okay. They haven't seen anything because we still have another 9 months. We got a lot of work to do. Why do we want to see something right now?" The fact is they wanted to see something now because they wanted to know whether they should pull the plug now, because they're not going to wait 9 months and find out they already spent a year's worth of budget and got nothing from it. So they wanted confidence. So we were working in that kind of context. We'd already done a lot to shake their confidence. So I said, "No, we can't. Okay, we're not going to be bullied into delivering garbage, right?" I think Bob Martin, Uncle Bob, Robert C. Martin said, we're not going to ship, um, crap garbage, right? Under no circumstance would we be bullied into. So I was kind of following that code. And there was another person who had come to our daily scrums, and I couldn't see what value he was providing either. He was working in the data center. He was not a programmer. And he would come and just kind of observe and talk about stuff in the data center, which was so far away. We're just thinking of getting these buttons on the screen and getting things to work. And he said, and I couldn't figure out what value he was providing in our daily scrums. And when the project manager says, "Can we go live now?" I said, "No, we can't." And then he said, "Yes, we can." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, we can deploy it to a live production environment in the data center, but restrict the access to it, so only IP addresses within our company can actually access it." So here you have a guy who doesn't know how to program, and another guy who's a project manager, doesn't know anything technical, doesn't know about agile and all these things. And they together put up an idea, and I thought, this is okay, worth a try. And so we put it into live a couple of weeks later. And as we were putting it into live, we discovered all kinds of problems with our architecture. So thank you, Paul, and thank you, Nas Irshad, for
Yeah.
coming to say, because we discovered that we need to have a DMZ and proxies and stuff like that. So anyways, we put it into live, and this is 4 months into the project. We still have another 8 months left. By Christmas, we had something to deploy. And the stakeholders were blown away. They said, "Wow, this isn't live. We can't believe this. This is amazing. This isn't live." And they know it doesn't look like anything because we haven't, but the fact that it was on live, it gave them such confidence in us that they allow us to carry on, and they saved the project. So I think it was the lesson, though, his huge lesson for me there is that I have this, often this technical swagger, and sometimes it's time to I think we have to really tap into the diversity of the people around us, and listen and come up with unconventional ideas.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, it reminds me of a phrase. We had other phrases on other teams, but the current team I'm on is one of them says, "That sounds crazy. Let's try it." So
Yeah,
yeah, if, almost anything can be tried in a small experiment. So
yeah, yeah.
And kind of going back to the principles, the Agile Manifesto principles, working software being the primary measure of progress. A lot of people cannot see rapid updates, and then they lose confidence over time. And so it's often stakeholders have very little tolerance for long durations where they don't see something changing on the UI or something that immediately impacts them. And so there's this balance of keeping people involved and understanding, how often and regarding like Scrum and like 2 weeks and demo days, from the 2 week period, I think that's a lot of what they're trying to get out of that. But sometimes the real time piece is good too, of like, hey, everybody, you can try this out right now, and getting it to the broadest number of users, right, possible, and slowly growing that bubble. Um, so yeah, when you talk about technical excellence and good design, enhancing agility, what specifically comes to mind there from paying attention to those things? Like what? Yeah.
So I mean, if you look at just agility in the word in the word that most people in the world understand the word agility. So if you ask someone in IT, they'll say agile is a methodology. Some people say it's a framework. Some people say it's a community. Some people say it's a project management methodology. Some people say it's an umbrella. Many people say it's an umbrella, which I think is a very confusing metaphor. I've also been told that it's an ice cream shop and Scrum is one of the flavors. So we're getting weirder and weirder with our. So I always do is part of my workshops. I tell people, go home, find someone normal, okay, and ask them what Agile means and get an example. And they do that. They speak to their mom, their dad, their son or daughter. As long as they have a 14-year-old vocabulary, they'll know what it means.
Yeah.
But don't ask anybody who works in an office in IT. Okay, ask your Uber driver, ask your grocer, ask your barber, and they all come back with the same answer, right? It's being able to adapt, respond quickly, change shape, change direction, and they'll give the same examples. Children, gymnasts, footballers. These are all examples. So 99% of the people on the planet will define Agile in that way and describe it in that way, and they'll spell it with a lowercase a, because to them they haven't been corrupted by the marketing speak, and so that's the definition I'm sticking to. That's the definition that's in the dictionary, and that's one that I think is consistent across the board. So what enables us to adapt quickly and respond to change? We see it all the time. It's advances in technology. And the big leap in technology around the 90s was well, a whole bunch of things, I guess, that how cheap memory was becoming and how more and more stuff you can put into software, and then what led to object-oriented programming. That was the big leap forward, which allowed, for example, I could sit there and draw and create a UML diagram in front of a non-technical person. They can look at it and understanding it, and they don't realize that UML diagram is actually code. It's a graphical representation of the code. It's a class which has behaviors and it has properties, and I can right-click on that and it'll generate the code. They don't realize that we're actually designing designing stuff together. So it eliminated a lot of the middle people, the people who used to be able to translate business requirements into technical specifications. You don't need that anymore, because you're looking at the business requirement and you're looking at the technical specification. You're creating test cases which read like plain English, so a non-technical person can read it. All this stuff was made possible because of object-oriented programming. So the level of collaboration was new, which means we could also respond to change quickly. When a customer changes their mind, guess what? We have a whole suite of those test cases that we created together, you and I, customer, you and I. Those test cases are automated. So every time you change something, we can run our automated regression suite and figure out within a few seconds whether we've broken something or whether a requirement is inconsistent with another requirement. So just the speed of being able to respond to change quickly. And that's what I got a chance to meet Kent Beck once. And I was dying to ask this question, because I was also curious about lean and studied lean and looked at the Toyota production system, and I read the machine that changed the world on my bookshelf here, and I said, XP came from Chrysler, right? It was in kind of all those ideas came from that project at Chrysler. Chrysler's a big company. They probably have a lot of process, and I can imagine that one of the things that got him allowed him to bypass a lot of this process was extreme programming, and the work from Chet Hendrickson and Ron Jeffries and all them. And I said, at that time, all the companies were looking at Toyota. Chrysler, probably like GM, was looking at Toyota. Do you think that the extreme programming practices are from lean? Are they actually from lean? Was it that environment where people were talking about lean and all those ideas inspired new ways of developing software? Because if you're in that environment, everybody's talking about Toyota production system and lean and all this stuff, it's got to rub off into other areas. And I even have a crossword. After I do a whole bunch of coding contests with people, I show them a lean crossword and they're learning Japanese terms and stuff like that. And they're correlating a lot of the extreme programming practices with Pakayoke and Kaizen and Jidoka and all these different terms. And I thought the correlation, and I went to him, I said, it's lean, isn't it? It's lean. All these ideas came from lean, right? Every single of the 12 practices from extreme programming can be linked to lean practices. Is that where lean came from? Is that what was going through your mind? And he said a resounding, maybe. But actually, it's actually about really reducing the cost of change. So that's what he told me in the end. It was about reducing the cost of change. So one of the reasons why people, one of the things that prevent people from changing is that change is expensive. But if you have an automated regression suite, if you have Pakayoke, if you have Jidoka, if you have Kaizen, if you have eliminating waste continuously in your code, in your processes, then yeah, you're going to reduce the cost of change. So, and it's all because of technology. We also see that just in other industries as well. I mean, throughout. I mean, during the pandemic, where I live here in London, in the UK, there's a pizza chain called Pizza Express. They're a nice pizza franchise, and they have all over the UK, maybe hundreds, maybe even 1,000, I don't know, outlets. And where I live in Streatham, during the pandemic, they had to close down because they're paying rent. They're a restaurant. They make money off of serving people at tables. Nobody's coming in. But the small pizza place just down the road, they survived the pandemic. Okay. They didn't have an IT department like the Pizza Express did. They didn't have skilled developers but they did have this. All right. And this is an example of technical excellence. So how do they survive? They're maybe three partners or something. They got to figure out, we got to survive. They don't have a lot of money like pizza. They don't have a lot of investors. It's just them and all of their savings. And what do? They just went to Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Hunger Station, DoorDash. Every country's got their own Utlub and Talabat and all these. And they within 24 hours they're able to adapt. And it's because of technology. Now the large organization had access to the same technology. The problem is they were too big. You can't just make this decision overnight. So all of these ideas that telling people that if you scale up, you'll be more agile is false advertising. It's very cruel. What we need to tell people is, look, you need to scale down and focus on technology, and that will increase your agility. So I think it's a shame that people are adopting heavier and heavier processes and kind of the blob that just keeps absorbing more and more best practices until you get these massive bodies of knowledge. And scaling up, everybody knows, going back to the dictionary definition of agility, the bigger you are, the less agile you'll be. And I in my classes and my workshops, I tell people usually just before lunch, before we do lunch, we do some stretches. All right, so bend down, they take some shapes, and that's okay. You're going to go. Part of your work is to have a big lunch. Usually it's on weekends, so it's a big Sunday roast or something to give people a good hour, and they have, and then they come back, and then later in the afternoon we do some more movements, and it's how do you feel now? Do you feel more agile or less agile? People tell me, oh, I had 3 slices of pizza. I'm not feeling very agile right now. So everybody knows that the bigger you are, the less agile you'll be. So you're always trying to scale down, not trying to scale up. Sometimes I understand you have to scale up. Some things cannot be developed through a small group of people yet. Maybe we just don't have the technology yet to eliminate a lot of the traditional jobs and things like that. But so I would say that how do you achieve agility? Not because of your size, because of scaling up, but despite your size. Again, it comes down to technology, having a good continuous integration pipeline. You can have people all over the world who don't even know each other. You don't even know who your teams are. You don't know. I used to work at Cisco in 2001, and I didn't know who was on my team. These are big routers, routers you call them in North America. We call them routers here. And these are big, systems with millions and millions of lines of code and all these different things. And we didn't know who was working on what, but we had an amazing continuous integration build process, which was always kept working. And anybody who broke something, we knew who broke it, when it was broken, why it was broken. And so we could work all around the world in numerous offices because of those technical practices. And I was using those technical practices a year before I heard about extreme programming.
Nice.
So this is, I think, it's so obvious to me.
Sure.
That this is where agility in the dictionary sense, your ability to change shape and change direction, comes from. It doesn't come from the best practices. It doesn't come from scaling up. It doesn't come from a lot of the I don't want to say, because I don't want to diminish it, softer stuff, the collaboration and making people feel safe. That stuff is important. but I don't think that is where the agility comes from, as compared to, you know, where mainly comes from advances in technology, I believe.
Yeah, I'm with you in many ways in that one, I love your interest in lean, and I have similar feelings and inferences that it feels like XP is an outflow of lean, or lean for software. And the more lean books I've read, the more I'm like, they're doing like the factory version of XP, or things like that. And I really like that, getting back to the heart of Agile. Like, what does it mean in plain English on the street, as opposed to the PMP, or Prince version of it. And I like how you phrased it. I also like the phrasing, poised to adapt, right? And before, what things need to be in place for you to be poised to adapt, right? Before I learned technical practice that enabled agility, that made you, principles and practices that gave you the ability to turn on a dime, I would be at teams, and people, product owners would be like, "So you guys are agile now, so you can just turn on a dime?" And I'm like, "Sure, but you can't just will things like that into existence, right?"
Mm.
We would just like try harder to turn on a dime, and it wouldn't work. But through, like you said, smaller batches, applying lean thinking to software, when you break things down to smaller and smaller pieces, and you have test, coverage and confidence, and all these kind of things, then it's like, oh yeah, it's very possible to turn on a dime, so to speak.
Yeah.
But anyways, end of monologue. We are getting a little bit closer to our end time, so maybe we can
Wow.
jump into that third topic if you're happy to
Mhm.
pivot. In your opinion, why do higher education institutions still teach waterfall?
Okay, so yeah, this is really puzzling because when I didn't major in software or anything. I majored in mechanical engineering, but I did take programming courses. I was originally going to minor in that, and that's when we first started to get, to the software development lifecycle, and what they call the SDLC, which looks like a waterfall process. Um, and I mean, first of all, waterfall's not bad. Okay. And I also make sure I point out to people that the very first agile software development method that was represented in that meeting, where the manifesto was drafted, the very first method was a waterfall process. It's known as DSDM. It's lesser known around the world, but it is actually originated here in the UK and Southwest England. And it's a waterfall process. If you look at feature-driven development, it's a waterfall process. So waterfall and agile are not mutually exclusive. Waterfall and Scrum are mutually exclusive. The two cannot coexist because one has got phases, the other one doesn't. The other one has divisions of labor. The other one doesn't have divisions of labor. One does. So the two cannot coexist. But can you still do waterfall and still be agile? Yes. So theoretically, sure, you can just work in shorter waterfall cycles. And if you just Google agile process versus waterfall, you will see dozens of pictures which show waterfall, define, design, develop, test, deploy. And then below it, you'll see 3 waterfall pictures, but they're drawn in a circle. So the idea is that if you draw your waterfall in a circle, it's not waterfall anymore. It's still waterfall. Okay. I encourage viewers to just try it out. You'll see dozens of pictures which show the exact same thing, but it's drawn in a circle. So there's nothing wrong with waterfall, but I don't see how it's, at least theoretically, it seems to make sense. But when you, as a developer, it is impossible. It actually is impossible. And I think the people who are telling us to do waterfall are people who maybe haven't coded for a very long time. And they don't understand that you cannot test without coding. You cannot code without test simultaneously. I ask any developer in my class, so I say, okay, I would like you to start writing all the code without understanding any of the requirements. You can't do any requirements analysis. Somebody else will do that. Their job is they're the business analyst. They're going to understand all the requirements. You're not allowed to. You can't analyze any of the requirements, any of the business. Just start typing it up. And they said, I can't do that. I said, okay, so you're a business analyst. And they said, yeah. So it's more efficient and more effective when you talk directly to the people who are asking for the work, rather than going for an intermediary, because you're going to have understand and analyze the requirements anyways. So you are a business analyst. And then later on, I say, okay, why don't we have testers in Scrum, for example? We don't have these divisions of labor. And those, and then I asked a developer, I said, I got to show them some code. And I said, okay, I want you to write up your code for 2 weeks without testing it. You're not allowed to run to see if it works. You're not allowed to test it. And they said, I can't do that. And they will test it. They'll do unit tests. They'll talk with other developers and say, okay, I'll integrate my work with your work, make sure it works together. So they're doing integration testing. They'll put it onto a phone to see if it works. They're doing end-to-end testing. They'll notice if there's any performance issues or degradation. They're doing performance testing. And so they're taking responsibility for the quality. So they are testers and they are software developers. The only time I think you could actually do waterfall was probably prior to 1970s when my dad used to program. I grew up in a house where there was punch cards on the floor in boxes on the floor, and I used to make things out of them. Right now, this is my dad's programming. He would have to go to a room and draw like a drafting table and trade flow charts and stencils and stuff like that. That was his design. After he analyzed the requirements, take his design, then he'd take his design and he'd go to a room and he'd punch into these keyboard, which would punch holes in this. He'd take his program and he had to integrate it. In those days, you integrated by putting an elastic band around your program. So that's how you compiled it. You'd put an elastic band around it. Then he'd have to go to a library, a physical library, find other people's modules, put them all in sequence together, put it in a box. So you can see all those stages of waterfall. He'd put it into a box and he had to put his box, put it into his car. And then he had to drive 2 hours away to the nearest computer to test it out. So that's, in those days, yeah, you had to use Waterfall, but now you don't need to because we have several computers on every desktop. So it's never really made sense to me. And yet in organizations, we have this new process. Okay, everybody, what's this new process? Yes, we're all going to follow this new process. And I look at it and it's like, we call it define, design, develop, and deploy. I said, dude, you just described Waterfall. What? He's still on. There's nothing wrong, and you can't. And so it's usually made by people who don't experience the work themselves. Against, they're probably looking at this. This is construction. This is manufacturing. Construction, manufacturing, Waterfall is perfectly okay. But for the nature of our work, which is creative, I don't see how it works. And I think where higher education institutions are failing us is that they are not leading, they are following. They are actually looking what other people are doing in industry. They've stopped leading. I don't think professors who put their slides together and give lectures, I don't think they came up with those ideas or got them from other professors. I think they're getting them from where everybody else gets stuff, from the internet, from other companies and stuff like that, and putting into theirs. And they're just following and preparing people for the work world, teaching them what people do out there without challenging it, without questioning it, and without experiencing it directly. So I think the universities have stopped leading. When it comes to innovative, trailblazing, experimental software ideas, they are not leading anymore. We're going to the companies, the startups and the unicorns, and we're learning from them. And I think the universities have a unique opportunity in that they have, that's what they're there to do. They're there to uncover better ways. And not just prepare their students for the work world, but also to advance the practice. And I think they're not doing that.
Yeah, I think if you had a biology major in a PhD program, you would likely see them working on theoretical biology. And it would be, we think that this will work this way. And I think in computer science, if you have a PhD student in computer science, they might be doing that from the perspective of an algorithm, right? I'm trying to uncover an algorithm that does this thing better. But I think what you're saying is that usually what we see, especially in earlier software education, is that there's no, or there's very little to know, or it's relatively unknown that anybody is doing software development process studies that are independent of where the current industry standard is. And I think I've seen that, and maybe it's like the distinction between the computer science degree and the software engineering degree. And I've seen this a lot lately where there's business degrees, half and half business and half computer science courses that result in somebody being prepared to do software development. But you don't see you don't see studies happening And maybe people in the comments, if you know of studies, I'd be really interested to hear about, maybe industry independent academic studies on software development processes that are not influenced by Agile or Waterfall. That would be really interesting, I think. But it seems like it doesn't exist. I think I agree with that sentiment. Well, we are about time. And so, I just, thank you for being on the show. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to plug or share something before we said goodbye to our audience.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank Tobias Mayer, who connected me with you guys. He's one of my mentors, and I'm very lucky to have met him and worked with him over the years. But so I also want to leave your viewers with this parting idea. What if we were to not refer to it as the Agile Manifesto anymore? What if we were to
Mm.
actually refer to it as the Manifesto for Software Development? And one of the adjectives we use to how we develop software is agile. Could have been adaptive, could have
Mm.
been, something else. But let's, what if we were to play with this idea of getting it back to what it is? Because I think that's where agility is going to come from. It's not going to come from, just overloading the term agile to mean everything that we're comfortable with, and just kind of um, uh, expanding the meaning so that we don't actually have to fundamentally confront, the difficult stuff. So, just something out there to think about that. What if we were to not refer to it as the Agile Manifesto anymore? We can just call it the Manifesto. Nobody's going to confuse it with another manifesto in our context, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, or not not refer to it as agile anymore. Just call it Agile Software Development. It's a bit of a mouthful. And this idea of using the word agile and waterfall as if they were mutually exclusive, I think, is also misleading. So it's something we should start to think about and say, what if we were to use language differently?
All right. I like it. Well, thank you for being on the show. To our audience, if you feel like, or if you're surprised that the title of the manifesto for Agile software development is different than the domain name agilemanifesto.org, then, or maybe somebody who would be surprised by this fact, sharing this episode with them could be really good. Let us know what you think in the comments, and subscribe, and more. And we will see everybody next time. And thank you for joining us on this adventure. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
See you. Thanks.